Hello and welcome to Maximum Aaliyah, the first talking book about the artist. It was written and researched by Ben Graham, music is by Amanda Thompson, and it's read by Sian Jones. You can check out our full catalogue on our website at www.chromedreams.co.uk.
I knew by the time I was 8. I would tell my mother, but I want to start such at 10. And around that age, 9 and 10, I used to ask her every day, did someone call about signing me? Have you heard anything?
The date is August the 25th, 2002. The place, New York's Times Square. In one of the busiest, most cosmopolitan thoroughfares in the world, business is continuing as usual. Traffic is moving. Street vendors are hawking. Summer tourists are merging with local workers, businessmen and families. The homeless and the crazy, the pickpockets, the junkies and the whores, the religious preachers and political activists all are busying themselves beneath the vast electric billboards, neon signs and digital video screens. But somewhere in the centre of it all, another light is blazing. Throughout the warm urban night, a group of mourners has gathered, serious, respectful, dedicated to the memory of someone that most of them never met, yet who they still hold in love and reverence. They are black and white, male and female, mostly young, mostly fashionably dressed in the latest streetwear. Some of them would normally be spending this evening going clubbing, or hanging out with their homies, or babysitting, or doing their homework. Instead, they are gathered for a candlelit vigil to mark the first anniversary of the death of their idol, the singer, actress, producer, model and artist Aaliyah. Aaliyah was just 22 when she died, yet she left behind her a legacy of work, the importance of which continues to grow in the wake of her passing. Over the course of 3 albums, the first recorded when she was just 14, and a handful of scattered tracks, she both reflected and defined the direction of soul, R&B and hip-hop music throughout the 1990s. Her choice of producers and writers, from R. Kelly to Timbaland and Missy Elliott, was emblematic of mainstream black music's stylistic shift over the course of the decade, from lush orchestrated ballads to tough minimalist urban grooves. In addition, she was one of the few artists to successfully cross over from music to films and back again, gaining both critical acclaim and commercial success for her starring roles in Romeo Must Die and the posthumously released Queen of the Damned. While barely out of her teens, she had achieved what many rock stars turned actors, from David Bowie and Mick Jagger to Sting and Mariah Carey, have been striving for well into middle age. There is no doubt that had she lived, her success in this field would have continued to grow, with major roles in the 2 Matrix sequels in production at the time of her death. Aaliyah also had success with film soundtracks, receiving an Oscar nomination for her song Journey to the Past from the film Anastasia, and acting as executive producer on the Romeo Must Die score, to which she contributed 3 tracks that were to become smash hit singles, including the #1 pop hit Try Again. After she was killed, it was revealed that she'd been cast as the romantic lead in Some Kind of Blue, a film set during the 1958 Newport Jazz Festival, about a fan who falls for the daughter of his musical hero. Had this role come about, it would have broadened Aaliyah's acting range beyond the world of action thrillers and won her belated recognition among serious cinemaphiles. The fans gathered to mourn and remember her life and passing in Times Square that night were well aware of her importance and achievements, and the double tragedy of her being taken from us so young. For not only had a warm, beautiful and caring young woman been cut down while still only beginning to live her life, but a great artist had been lost who had only been able to hint at her full creative potential. A year on, and the first posthumous album of her unreleased work was just about to be released. Entitled I Care For You, it was a compilation of previously available material and 5 new tracks, including the song I Miss You, which was a hit single in the latter part of 2002. While somewhat patchy and unsatisfactory as either a tribute to her life, a greatest hits package or a lost album, the record served to prove the point that Aaliyah's presence on the music scene is far from diminished by her death. In January of 2002, she received the American Music Awards for Best Soul R&B Artist and Best Soul R&B Album, and the following month, Queen of the Damned became the #1 movie in America in its first week of release. Elsewhere, her influence can be felt in the music of everyone from Missy Elliott to Alicia Keys. Aaliyah may have left this world, but her music and her creativity remain.
I performed with her in Las Vegas at Bally's Hotel at age 11 for 5 nights. I would come out in the middle of her show and sing Home, and then we would sing Believe in Yourself together. And she told me, you've got to learn how to move and work an audience and, really perform.
Aaliyah Dana Houghton was born on January the 16th, 1979, in the same Bedford-Stuyvesant district of Brooklyn, New York, as the rapper who would become known as the Notorious B.I.G. It was a decent enough working-class black neighbourhood, not exactly what you'd call the ghetto, but the street corners where the hustlers and the crack dealers hung out weren't too far away either. Perhaps with this in mind, Aaliyah's parents upped and left Brooklyn when their daughter was just 5 and moved west to America's Motor City, Detroit, Michigan. Then again, maybe Detroit wasn't a much better place to bring up a child. Since the infamous race riots of the late 1960s, Detroit's once famous industries had packed up in droves, leaving the once thriving inner city a ghost town of empty, crumbling buildings, abandoned warehouses, poverty and gangs. Those families that could afford it, mainly white, moved out to the suburbs, adding and increasing to the social decay of the city centre. But Aaliyah's parents had one positive reason for moving to Detroit: family. When Aaliyah, her parents Diane and Michael, and her brother Rashad arrived in the Motor City, they found waiting for them Diane's brother, Barry Hankerson, his son Jomo, who was 8 years older than Aaliyah, and his wife, the soul legend Gladys Knight. With her backing group, the Pips, Knight had been responsible for some of the most enduring songs and performances in popular music history, including If I Were Your Woman and Midnight Train to Georgia. Although a southern soul singer from Atlanta, it was no surprise to find Knight now resident in Detroit, home of the famous Motown label, which in the early 1960s first put black American music, soul and R&B into the mainstream, launching such artists as Smokey Robinson, The Temptations, Diana Ross and the Supremes, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye and the Jackson 5, including of course baby brother Michael. Motown songs also formed the basis for the Beatles' earliest albums and can probably be credited with inventing modern popular music as we know it now. Detroit also produced some of the most groundbreaking rock music of the late 60s and early 70s. And in the 80s, the city was busy inventing techno, as the abandoned warehouses of the city centre hosted some of the earliest rave and house parties. Detroit then was a town founded on music, and Aaliyah's family were intimately connected to this tradition. Her uncle too had a long-standing history in the entertainment business, and there was always music playing in the house when Aaliyah was growing up, with the latest releases from Whitney Houston and Luther Vandross playing alongside soul classics by the likes of Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye. Aaliyah's mother had aspired to be a professional singer and actress herself when she was younger, and got as far as releasing a record and singing in plays that toured the country. But by the time her daughter was born, she had settled into teaching. When the family moved to Detroit, she gave that up too to be a full-time mother and housewife, while her husband and brother went into business together. The two families lived just 5 blocks apart in a nice middle-class neighbourhood on the west side of Detroit, and Aaliyah, her brother Rashad and her cousin Jomo became inseparable. Aaliyah's upbringing was full of love, music and pets, everything from cats and dogs to ducks and iguanas. Aaliyah, like her mother, was forever singing around the house, and it soon became apparent that she'd inherited both her talent and her aspirations. Music was part of her personality, and singing came as naturally to her as breathing or eating. Already strikingly beautiful as a child, she was apparently born with a full head of lustrous black hair and with an Arabic name that roughly translated means highest, most exalted one. It looked like Aaliyah was destined to become Detroit's next star.
It takes a lot of work to be a good dancer, as it takes a lot of work to be a good singer and to be a good actress. I believe in honing your craft no matter what it is that you do. And to this day, I still take dance lessons. I just recently took up Latin because it's just something I always wanted to do. So it takes, hard work and discipline and a love for it.
Aaliyah attended Gay Sioux Elementary, a private Catholic school where she was popular and attentive. Religion was as important a part of her upbringing as music, giving her a solid, stable foundation of faith from which to grow. At the age of 6, she made her first appearance on stage in the school production of Annie, a part that required 3 hours of rehearsals every day after school and also on weekends and holidays. She had a small part as one of many unnamed orphans and got to say one line. But as she remembered in an interview years later, she made that one line shine, and the experience left her hooked. Aaliyah knew what she wanted to do with her life. She wanted to perform. Naturally shy, she found that being on stage brought her out of herself. It enabled her to express the fire she felt burning within, and to win the attention and admiration of an audience. She also loved the camaraderie of putting on a show, and at Gay Sioux Elementary, the children were involved in every stage of production, from lighting to prop design. Pupils ranged in age from 5 to 13, and the school took its annual plays very seriously. Aaliyah went on to play larger roles in versions of 42nd Street and Hello Dolly, quickly developing into a singing, dancing and acting all-rounder.
Right now, I'm listening to Casey and JoJo. Love Casey and JoJo. Big Pun. I like SWV, Missy.
The title of R. Kelly's debut album, Born in the 90s, could be seen as misleading. While the record was released in 1991, its creator came into this world in 1967, and he was 26 by the time he achieved mainstream success with his second set, 1993's 12 Play. Hits like Your Body's Calling and Bump and Grind were lascivious, sexually obsessed paeans to the ladies, delivered with pristine hip-hop beats, schmaltzy strings and a sense of epic grandeur. Kelly's vocals moved from sultry murmur to soaring multi-octave passages of yearning and rapture, like some ghetto fusion of Marvin Gaye, Prince and Barry White with pecs. He was also a devout Christian, whose songs displayed an old-fashioned sense of religious morality alongside their fixation with sex. He would later score his biggest hit with the global smash I Believe I Can Fly from the Space Jam soundtrack, before being dogged by accusations of paedophile behaviour, accusations that, with hindsight, cast his relationship with Aaliyah in an altogether murkier light. R. Kelly knew Aaliyah through her uncle Barry Hankerson, who was also his manager. Hankerson had brought Kelly over to Aaliyah's house when she was just 10 or 11, before his first album came out, and had her sing for him. Kelly was impressed, and Hankerson immediately saw the potential in having him work with his young niece. Within a couple of years, he had launched his own independent record company, Blackground Enterprises, and Aaliyah was his first signing. He went on to broker a distribution deal for Blackground with Jive Records, the label to which R. Kelly was signed, and soon the pair were working together on Aaliyah's debut album. There was an immediate chemistry between them, and with Hankerson acting as executive producer, R. Kelly produced, wrote and played the majority of the instruments on what was to become Age Ain't Nothing But a Number, released in 1994. The title raised a few eyebrows, as at the time neither Aaliyah nor her record company would say exactly how old she was. They later claimed that they didn't want her age to be an issue, but if this was the case, the ploy had the opposite effect. The sultry beats and suggestive lyrics were typical R. Kelly material, and controversial enough when delivered by a 26-year-old male but portrayed by a young girl who seemed able to mix a childlike innocence with a distinctly adult knowingness. The effect was both startling and unsettling. And later that year, the controversy exploded when Vibe magazine printed what purported to be a certificate of marriage between Aaliyah and Kelly. "I don't really comment on all that because I know it's not true," Aaliyah said. "We're close and people took it the wrong way. I'm not married to Aaliyah or whatever Vibe magazine wrote," Kelly added. The pair continued to deny that they were married or even had a sexual relationship, maintaining that they were just good friends. Yet on his song "No One Knows How to Love Me Quite Like You Do," Kelly could be heard repeatedly chanting, "Aaliyah, you're the only one for me." The rumour went that Kelly and Aaliyah were very much in love, so much so in fact that Kelly had sent his bodyguards to fetch Aaliyah to join him while he was on tour, and that she'd followed him to Chicago. There, the 15-year-old had obtained fake ID and married her 26-year-old lover in a hotel room. The Vibe marriage certificate had listed Aaliyah's age as 18, which it would have to, as the marriage would be illegal and void were she any younger. Whatever the truth of the matter, by the end of the year, the relationship, both personal and professional, seemed to be over, with Aaliyah saying, "R. Kelly is a wonderful producer and a wonderful artist, but that time was very tense, so it's really not appropriate for us to see each other." Again, the rumour was that Aaliyah's father had threatened to put Kelly in jail, banned the pair from seeing each other, and immediately packed Aaliyah off to Europe and Japan for several months. Inevitably, the media had a field day, with speculation rife over the stories and the singer's real age. For the rest of her life, she would refuse to discuss the scandal. 2 years later, when she admitted to being 17, all she would say was that she was not married, but refused to comment on whether she ever had been. Even without the rumours of marriage and the possibility of a sexual scandal, there was already the danger that Aaliyah could merely be seen as R. Kelly's protégé, rather than as an artist in her own right. Her early image was very much as a baby girl version of her mentor, all dark glasses and baggy streetwear, unsmiling and mysterious. It was as though she was unwilling to project any kind of personality of her own, preferring instead to be an enigmatic blank canvas onto which fans and journalists could project their own conclusions and desires. Like many black urban artists, she was portrayed in a way that attempted to emphasise her rebellious, streetwise credentials, and no mention was made of the straight-A student who lived in a nice neighbourhood and who had been groomed for showbiz from an early age. The connection with R. Kelly was useful in so much as it got her noticed and allowed her to develop with a proven hit formula. But in the long run, if Aaliyah was going to establish her own identity as an artist, she would have to break away from her mentor. What was remarkable was how quickly she managed to do just that.
I like to stay home. I'm a homebody. I like to rent movies. Occasionally I like to do something that's really fun, like laser tag or go bowling or just go out to an arcade. But other than that, I like to kick it at home, invite my friends over, go to my friend's house and just laugh.
Aaliyah's debut single was the lilting, seductive and sensually smooth groove of Back and Forth, which immediately hit number 1 on the R&B hip-hop radio play charts and made the Billboard Top 5 in 1994. Ironically, the song that Back and Forth knocked off the R&B top spot was R. Kelly's Your Body's Callin'. Back and Forth was even sampled by Madonna on her hit single of the same year, Inside of Me. It was like being acknowledged by pop royalty. Maybe Madonna saw in Aaliyah the same mixture of determination, talent and precociousness that she herself had exhibited at that age. Or maybe she just wanted to borrow some street credibility from a rising star of the new generation. Either way, it was a sure sign that Aaliyah had arrived and was being taken seriously. The follow-up, At Your Best, You Are Love, was a cover of an old Isley Brothers hit and made number 2 on the R&B charts and the Billboard Top 10. Age Ain't Nothing But a Number, the album, had been awash with R. Kelly's trademark beats and strings, and this had done it no harm whatsoever. It was Kelly's name that got her noticed, and his distinctive sound that had gained her airplay and helped her win over audiences on the streets and in the suburbs. In many ways, his smooth Jeep beats were the perfect setting for her light, sensual vocals, creating a new hybrid sound that referenced classic soul and funk and contemporary hip-hop in equal measures. Her soft, breathy falsetto contrasted with the hard-edged groove and raw rhythms of the backing. And there was none of the over-emoting and vocal acrobatics of divas like Whitney Houston or Mariah Carey. Aaliyah's style was cool and laid back, innocent yet sophisticated, uptown and streetwise all at the same time. It was hard to know where Aaliyah fitted in, and for a while she was labelled alongside a disparate group of other innovative black artists as neo-soul. But all that neo-soul artists like D'Angelo, Maxwell and Erykah Badu seemed to have in common was an ability to confuse radio programmers and journalists who didn't quite know where to put them. The light, hip-hop jam of Down with the Clique was another hit single, as was an edited version of the title track. The LP itself achieved platinum sales, before its progress was slowed by the R. Kelly marriage rumours scandal. Yet, with Age Ain't Nothing But a Number, Aaliyah was ahead of her time, forging an urban crossover sound that by the end of the 90s would dominate American music. For anyone, this would be an achievement. But for someone barely into her mid-teens, it was astonishing. Other girls her age were worrying about their homework and whether boys liked them. Aaliyah was doing all that. But she was also appearing on MTV and the cover of music and fashion magazines around the country, performing before audiences of several thousands, shooting videos and attending swanky VIP parties. She was a role model for millions of other teenagers who recognised in her unique style something they could all connect with. She was the girl next door made good, down to earth but slightly aloof as well. An example of this is how she invited her schoolmates along to one of her video shoots as a work experience project, or hired them as backing dancers. She hadn't forgotten where she came from, but she wasn't letting where she came from forget where she was going either.
He's great to work with. I've known him for 2 years now. When we first met, we clicked, and one of the songs we did was One in a Million. We just clicked, and we had a great chemistry.
Following the runaway success and the controversy generated by her debut album, Aaliyah shied away from the spotlight for a while. She concentrated mainly on her school studies during 1995, surfacing most publicly as a model for Tommy Hilfiger in a nationwide billboard campaign. She also appeared in the notorious B.I.G.'s One More Chance video and worked with his Junior Mafia crew, reconnecting her with her Bedford Stuyvesant roots. Her only sole musical appearance was the track Are You Ready from the film soundtrack Sunset Park. In her absence, other black teen artists like Brandy and Monica appeared to fill the space she'd created, mixing wholesome good looks and church-going Sweet 16 innocence with street sass and a hint of budding sexuality. Their music and image was taken directly from Aaliyah's own mould. A little bit soul, a little bit rap, and a whole lot more pop. But as ever, Aaliyah was one step ahead, and her second LP would find her going in a whole other direction. With hindsight, it's easy to see what made One in a Million so successful, but at the time it wasn't so clear. In 1996, Timbaland and Missy Misdemeanor Elliott were relative unknowns. The former an untested DJ and producer, the latter an off-the-wall rapper best known for her wacky guest appearances on other people's records. When Aaliyah and Barry Hankerson hired them to produce and write songs for the singer's next album, they knew they were taking a risk. But they wanted to prove that there was more to Aaliyah than just R. Kelly. Indeed, following the controversy of their marriage, Aaliyah and Blackground had been dropped by Jive, so the two singers weren't even on the same label anymore. There was no point in working with another big-name producer. as then Aaliyah would still be seen as a puppet, being passed from one set of hands to another. No, they wanted to do something different. They wanted Aaliyah to establish her own identity. 1 in a Million certainly did that, though in the end only half the tracks on the album were produced by Timbaland. Jermaine Dupri was brought in as a concession to Aaliyah's new record label Atlantic, who pleaded for a more experienced hand at the tiller, and Naughty by Nature's KG produced standout track A Girl Like You, which also featured treats from the same group. The album ranged from the up-tempo urban groove of Beats for the Streets to the epic ballad Never Given Up. Her vocals on the album earned comparisons with Minnie Riperton and Janet Jackson, but Timbaland's jazzy, skittering beats and minimalist production gave the record a futuristic, almost science fiction sheen. Timbaland and Aaliyah had struck up a close creative working relationship in the studio, experimenting with different sounds and techniques. Aaliyah had total trust in Timbaland, and in turn knew that if he had a crazy idea for a track, something no one else would go for, she'd always give it a try. Missy Elliott too became good friends with Aaliyah, writing lyrics for her to sing that took unexpected twists and turns and allowed her to empathise with a female perspective, rather than have older men putting words into her mouth. Elliott was very conscious of Aaliyah's youth when writing for her, soon nicknaming her Baby Girl and being careful not to have her sing anything too lewd or suggestive. The first fruit of the collaboration was the single If Your Girl Only Knew. Over a swaggering, almost threatening bass line, Aaliyah comes across as a strong, independent woman who refuses to let a guy come on to her because she knows that he already has a girlfriend. The track was another R&B number one and was followed up the charts by 4-Page Letter, Hot Like Fire, The One I Gave My Heart To, and the LP's title track. The album also included Choosy Lover, another old Isley Brothers song, and a version of Marvin Gaye's Got to Give It Up, featuring rapper Slick Rick. Old school soul meets new school R&B flavour at its finest, reckoned Blackbeat magazine. 1 in a Million not only effectively launched the careers of Timbaland and Missy Elliott, thus redefining the sound of 90s R&B and rap, but it cast off the spectre of R. Kelly forever, and proved that Aaliyah was not a one-trick pony. It seemed now that she could turn her hand to anything, and that's exactly what she did.
I play a fantastical creature, Queen of the Damned. I play a vampire, and not just any vampire. I'm playing the queen of all vampires. She's the mother. She's 4,000 centuries old. So there was a lot that I had to do to really find Akasha, and I took 2 months of preparation for that. She had to have an accent, had to do wire work because she flew, so there was a lot that went into bringing Akasha to life.
Aaliyah's first film role was in the low-key comedy A Low Down Dirty Shame in 1994, in which she essentially appeared as herself, singing the song The Thing I Like. She had also made herself a distinctive small-screen presence through her often groundbreaking videos. She intended her clips to stand out among other female R&B singers on MTV, and she found an ideal collaborator in young up-and-coming director Paul Hunter. Their work together was softly surreal and expressionistic, a wash of colour and light, striking, erotic and strange. While other music videos are brash and in your face, Aaliyah's were languid, relaxed yet unsettling at the same time. Aaliyah, however, had ambitions that went beyond video. She wanted to act in films. Her first ventures into cinema were musical, contributing songs to soundtracks, most notably Journey to the Past from the animated film Anastasia, which was nominated for an Oscar for Best Original Song from a Motion Picture in 1998. Unfortunately, that was the year that Titanic swept the boards, and Aaliyah was beaten in her category by Celine Dion with My Heart Will Go On. She did, however, get to perform her song at the ceremony, which was broadcast live on television to 1 million people, as well as to a live audience including the cream of Hollywood players and legends. For Aaliyah, it was a glimpse of another world. a world that she, along with all her fellow students at the Detroit High School for the Fine and Performing Arts, had always wanted to break into. She had graduated the previous year, and her former principal, watching the awards at home, burst into tears on seeing Aaliyah perform her number. She had truly made it. Yet for Aaliyah, the Oscars only showed her how much further she could go. At the ceremony, she was mixing with the real stars: Madonna, Jack Nicholson, and so on. The following year, Aaliyah had another soundtrack hit with Are You That Somebody from Eddie Murphy's Dr. Dolittle. But the desire to actually step in front of the camera remained. In 2000, she finally got her wish, starring in the action thriller Romeo Must Die alongside martial arts expert Jet Li. Aaliyah played Trish O'Day, the daughter of a gangster boss who rebels by becoming a hotshot lawyer and working against him. In the film's most memorable moment, Jet Li uses Aaliyah's body as a human weapon in an impressively choreographed fight scene. Aaliyah had studied Kung Fu when she was 8 and performed all her own stunts. The film was a box office hit and received good reviews, with Aaliyah coming in for praise for her emotional scenes as well as the action ones. At one point, she's required to cry real tears. She took the role seriously, studying acting with Harold Guskin, one of Hollywood's most respected coaches, who trained her up with a repertoire of Shakespeare, Chekhov, and Tennessee Williams. Aaliyah also executive produced the soundtrack, as well as contributing 4 songs, 3 of which became hit singles. Besides Are You Feeling Me, there was I Don't Wanna and Come Back in One Piece, featuring DMX, both of which went top 10. And Try Again, which was the first single in history to go to number 1 on the strength of radio play alone. The soundtrack album, also featuring artists who had become personal friends of Aaliyah's, such as Destiny's Child, Timbaland and Genuine, sold over 1 million copies, while the film grossed over $58 million. Suddenly, Aaliyah was someone that Hollywood could take seriously.
We used 5 pythons in the shoot, and first I was a little nervous, but then once I started to handle them, I totally fell in love with them and felt I had somewhat of an affinity towards them. I mean, they're very mysterious creatures. They live in solitude. They're dangerous, yet at the same time, they're quite beautiful, and I thought that it would be an animal that could represent me on this album.
Having left Jive, following the rumours of her underage marriage to R. Kelly, Aaliyah now found herself in a similarly turbulent relationship with her new label, Atlantic. There were personality clashes, although it has to be said that none of these involved Aaliyah herself. She was widely regarded as one of the warmest, most pleasant and down-to-earth people in the business. Barry Hankerson, however, her uncle and manager, seemed to have a gift for rubbing some people up the wrong way. Like any good manager, he put the interests of his client first, and when that client also happened to be family, he could be doubly ruthless. Both he and Aaliyah were impressed with Virgin America's handling of the Romeo Must Die soundtrack, and felt that Atlantic had failed to make a similar effort in promoting Aaliyah's own album. 1 in a Million, while it would later be critically acclaimed as a groundbreaking work, had not initially sold as well as Aaliyah's debut. It had proved that the singer was more than a teen flash in the pan, that she could stand on her own feet, and it had shifted a respectable number of units. But Hankerson was convinced that Aaliyah was capable of so much more, with the right record company behind her. In 2000, Blackground Enterprises and its whole roster of artists, which of course included Aaliyah, upped sticks yet again and moved to another parent company, from Atlantic to Virgin America. Atlantic were somewhat sour, as Aaliyah had already begun recording her 3rd album for them, and now Virgin were going to get the finished product. In other respects, however, they weren't sorry to see either Blackground or Hankerson go. An Atlantic executive even said he felt sorry for Hankerson's future label mates at Virgin, who'd now have to deal with him. At the 2000 MTV Music Video Awards, Aaliyah won Best Video from a Film and Best Female Video for Try Again. She dedicated the award to her grandfather and the memory of her grandmother after flying in especially for the event from Australia, where she was busy recording her new album and filming The Queen of the Damned. Yet, as 2001 began, there was still no sign of a new record from Aaliyah. Fans have been waiting nearly 5 years now for a follow-up to One in a Million. During this time, her unknown collaborators on that record, Timbaland and Missy Elliott, had become superstars, and the sound that they had created for her was everywhere. Once more, the pressure was on. Could Aaliyah step back into the fray and reclaim what was hers? Or would she have moved on to the next level, revolutionising soul and hip-hop for a third time? The world finally got a chance to learn when Aaliyah's new single, We Need a Resolution, was released in April 2001. Produced by Timbaland, who also delivered a rap in the song's middle section, it was written by Static, the man behind her last two #1 hits, Are You That Somebody and Try Again. This dark, relatively aggressive comeback confounded some listeners, especially when it was accompanied by a bizarre video in which Aaliyah writhed around with live snakes all over her body, smeared herself with mud, levitated while wearing headphones, and wandered around in a gothic, futuristic lair more suited to Marilyn Manson than our favourite clean-cut girl next door. If the single was disturbing, failing even to penetrate the top 40, then the album released shortly after received a much more positive response. Going straight into the charts at number 2, it sold over 200,000 copies in its first week of release. Mellow and sultry, the LP, titled simply Aaliyah, showed a singer who had matured both as an artist and as a woman. This wasn't about the production, though Timbaland and Missy Elliott were both present and correct once again. This was about the person whose name was in the title. Aaliyah had lived a little, and now had the experience to breathe real emotion into epic ballads like Never No More and the voluptuous, powerful More Than a Woman. Other highlights included the Missy-penned Quiet Storm, I Care For You, and the dance floor raver You Got the Nerve. Then there was Rock the Boat, a classy club pop crossover tune that was earmarked as the album's next single. Aaliyah had truly come into her own, and if it took the public a while to get used to the fact that their R&B sweetheart was now a complex, full-blooded adult artist, then they would eventually find the rewards of her new work all the more satisfying. But tragically, Aaliyah would not be around to reap the benefits.
The movies actually prolonged the album. I started working on this third album before I did Romeo, but then when that project came up, I took a break from it to do Romeo Must Die and then to do that soundtrack. I took a conscious break before, starting to record because I wanted to take a break for myself to rejuvenate and just get my creative juices flowing and to feel like I could give my audience my best. So when I did Queen of the Damned, I decided to record the album at the same time.
Many were surprised when Aaliyah was cast as Akasha, a 6,000-year-old vampire goddess in the film The Queen of the Damned. Others, including the movie's director, thought that she was the perfect choice. Michael Reimer wanted someone who could project an aura of dark and dangerous sexuality, who could be amoral, all-powerful, mysterious and extremely charismatic. He had seen Aaliyah's videos on MTV, and she seemed to have just the image he was looking for. But could a teenage soul singer cut it in the gothic fantasy world of author Anne Rice, upon whose cult novels the film was based? Her fans were known for their obsessiveness over the details of the books. If Reimer didn't get it right, he would face the unforgiving wrath of his core audience. Queen of the Damned was the second film adaptation of an Anne Rice book, following on from 1995's Interview with a Vampire, starring Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, which had been a hit both at the box office and with the fans. Reimer was working on a much tighter budget than his predecessors, and his casts were all relatively unknown. Irish actor Stuart Townsend stepped into Tom Cruise's shoes as the vampire Lestat, who in the new film has reinvented himself as a rock star, and whose stadium-filling brand of goth metal, written and performed for the movie by Marilyn Manson and Korn, awakens the queen of all vampires, Akasha, from her centuries-old slumber. After seeing her videos, Reimer received further recommendation for casting Aaliyah as Akasha from the actor Willem Dafoe. Dafoe's son was a huge fan of the singer, and Dafoe himself had also been won over by her abilities. Accordingly, Reimer met with Aaliyah in Los Angeles, where she was accompanied as ever by her parents and brothers. Reimer said that he found the whole family unnerving for the calm, even-tempered way they dealt with everything, displaying the sort of serenity usually only found in religious cults. Reimer told Aaliyah that this was a very demanding role, and that it could ruin her career if she wasn't up to it. Playing a vampire would be very different from the part she had in Romeo Must Die, as a feisty, independent human woman very much like herself. At her audition, she was asked to read a 10-page speech from Oscar Wilde's play Salome, an incredibly challenging piece, but Aaliyah was more than up to it. She used her training as a singer and a dancer to find the rhythm in the words, to act them out, to use her body, to exhibit a sexual feline energy. It was exciting, Reimer remembers. For Aaliyah, the part was a chance for her to get in touch with her dark side. "I've always been mysterious," she told Vibe magazine. "I think I'm a bit of a vampire in real life, and there are times when I just want to be myself. I want to be alone." Akasha was an Egyptian goddess, so the part also allowed Aaliyah to indulge her fascination with Egyptian culture, and to add to the collection of Egyptian artefacts that littered her apartment. According to the cast and crew, Aaliyah took filming in her stride, despite the fact that she was recording her new album at the same time. She was getting up at 4 a.m. for her makeup call, filming all day and then working on her album till midnight. Aaliyah even overcame her famous shyness to film a love scene with Stuart Townsend, in which both actors make out in a hot tub full of roses, which ends with Aaliyah sucking blood from Townsend's chest. However, despite being featured heavily on posters and in trailers for the film, fans were disappointed to find that Aaliyah had surprisingly little screen time in the finished film. Akasha doesn't even appear until halfway through, and in the end much of her dialogue isn't even her own. It was overdubbed by her brother Rashad in the wake of the singer's untimely death. For by the time Aaliyah brought the part of an undead vampire queen to vivid life, she herself had passed beyond the grave.
We just literally act a fool, and I love it. It's like being a kid. And sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need to just be pure silly.
Aaliyah was on Abaco, a tiny island in the Bahamas, to film the video for her new single, Rock the Boat. Work had begun in Miami on August the 22nd with some tricky underwater scenes. And a couple of days later, the singer and her crew had flown the 200 miles down to Abaco to finish the shot. The video was being directed by Hype Williams, the talented young auteur responsible for Missy Elliott's super-duper fly, The Rain, and P. Diddy's Been Around the World. By Saturday, August the 25th, the shoot had been completed, and the crew were due to return back to the States. But instead of contacting the Sky Limo charter company, who had flown them down to the Bahamas and were due to pick them up again on Sunday, 8 of the crew, including Aaliyah, decided to go home early and used a small local company, Black Hawk International Airways. One reason why Aaliyah was in such a hurry to get back home may have been that she was missing her boyfriend, Rockefeller Records chairman Damon Dash. A millionaire music executive while still in his 20s, Dash had risen from the streets in partnership with his friend and Rockefeller's star act, the rapper Jay-Z. The pair had later expanded into a clothing line, earning even more money. He and Aaliyah had met earlier that year and were soon a hot item, although they kept their relationship under wraps and away from the media. But it was an open secret that the pair were planning to eventually marry. Aaliyah had told members of the crew how much he was missing Damon, and it certainly appears to have been her own choice to set off back early. However, she also had a heavy workload. The MTV Music Video Awards were coming up, she had to finish dubbing her dialogue for The Queen of the Damned, and begin shooting on the 2 Matrix sequels. The twin-engine Cessna 402B took off from Marsh Harbour Airport shortly after 6:30 p.m. On board were Aaliyah's 2 hairstylists, Anthony Dodd and Eric Foreman, makeup artist Christopher Maldonado, Blackground record executive Gina Smith, Virgin America's director of video production Douglas Kratz, Aaliyah, her chaperone Keith Wallace, and her bodyguard Scott Gallin. The pilot was Louis Morales III. Shortly after takeoff, the plane went into a nosedive at no more than 100 feet and crashed on the south end of the runway, bursting into flames. All those on board were killed. Firefighters who arrived at the scene of the crash reported that 3 men survived the initial impact, but that Aaliyah was among those killed instantly. One of the survivors was her bodyguard, Scott Gallin, who was still conscious as he was driven to hospital and kept asking if Aaliyah was all right. All 3 died soon afterwards. Witnesses said the airplane was smashed into several pieces, with bodies and wreckage still burning on the ground. The passengers appear to have been hurled from the plane on impact while still buckled into their seats. There was no chance of any survivors. Investigations have since determined that the probable cause of the crash was that the plane was overloaded. The pilot had been seen arguing with the passengers over the amount of luggage and equipment they were loading into the plane prior to takeoff, but they'd insisted it all had to come with them. It was later estimated that the plane was carrying 5,495 pounds worth of equipment, plus 9 people. Bearing in mind that the maximum safe load for such a plane is 6,300 pounds, and that Scott Gallin alone weighed 300 pounds, it was clear that the plane wasn't going to make it. The fact that Gallin was reportedly sat at the back of the plane, along with much of the luggage, probably didn't help either. The Federal Aviation Administration also later revealed that Black Hawk International Airways had been cited 4 times in the past 4 years, once for a safety violation, and that Louis Morales wasn't actually authorised to fly that plane. He had also pleaded guilty to possession of crack cocaine 12 days earlier and was facing the possibility of his pilot's licence being revoked. An autopsy found that his body contained traces of cocaine and alcohol, and crash investigators found that the plane itself had not been properly maintained. A month after the crash, the FAA inspector who had granted Morales his licence committed suicide, in what seemed an unending catalogue of tragedy and error. Both Aaliyah's parents and the families of the 2 hairstylists later filed multiple lawsuits over the crash, alleging, among other things, that Virgin Records had put profits before safety in using a cheap, disreputable plane company to ferry the crew back home. A year after her death, even Aaliyah's funeral bill was unpaid, with Virgin denying responsibility for costs after the people who had arranged for the funeral had left the company. Such sordid facts and dealings inevitably surface in the wake of such a catastrophe, when the worst has already happened. In the end, however, they pale into insignificance next to the devastating sense of loss felt by the families, friends and fans of those killed. Aaliyah was irreplaceable. Her death was sudden, unexpected and cruel, leaving so much potential unfulfilled, so many songs unsung, so many parts unplayed. Above all, there was a sense of injustice, that this shouldn't have happened. And the question, rather than how, was why. Why did this have to happen? It's a question that nobody can answer, just as nobody can take her place. Aaliyah was the one and only.
All artists, when we make music and we perform, our main goal is to touch someone and to reach them in one way or another.
Within days, the media were calling Aaliyah hip-hop's Lady Diana. And posters and billboards became impromptu memorials as fans covered them with scrawled messages of love, condolence and loss. The MTV Music Video Awards, where Aaliyah had been due to appear, were dedicated to her memory. Janet Jackson was the first to pay tribute, sharing a conversation that Aaliyah had had with her about her dead grandmother, before reading a poem that she'd received from a fan in Georgia, dealing with Aaliyah's death. Janet broke down on the poem's final line, "We haven't lost anyone. We gained an angel." Genuine, Timbaland and Missy Elliott took to the stage next, with Missy wearing a jacket that had Aaliyah's face painted on the back. They each spoke about what Aaliyah, who they knew as baby girl, meant to them. Aaliyah's brother, Rashad, then came up and read a short poem about his sister, before an interview with Aaliyah appeared on a huge video screen. "Everything is worth it," she said in the interview. "The hard work, the times when you're tired, the times when you're a bit sad, the good times when you're on stage performing in front of thousands of people. In the end, it's all worth it because it really makes me happy, and I wouldn't trade it for anything else in the world. I honestly wouldn't." Aaliyah died doing the thing that she loved, which is how her friends and her fans will remember her. As a warm-spirited, friendly, unpretentious young girl who nevertheless was driven by some inner fire. An artist who was talented, ambitious, and who had a vision. Her funeral was on August the 31st in New York City, when 10 horses transported Aaliyah's silver coffin in a glass-panelled and rose-bedecked carriage from the E. Campbell Funeral Home to St. Ignatius Loyola Roman Catholic Church, a short distance away. Over 1,000 fans gathered to watch the procession alongside stars like Usher, Busta Rhymes, Jay-Z, P. Diddy, Missy Elliott, Maya, Lil' Kim, Gladys Knight, Jet Li and Mike Tyson. At the end of the service, Aaliyah's mother released a single white dove into the air, to be followed by 21 more, one for each year of her daughter's life. Across town, meanwhile, at Cipriani's restaurant on 42nd Street, a public memorial was being held, with continuous loops of Aaliyah's videos, music and performances being played from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. By lunchtime, there was a line of people around the block queuing to get in. Aaliyah's family set up a memorial fund to their daughter to benefit breast cancer charities, and an Aaliyah Memorial Scholarship Fund was set up by Operation Get Down, a community organisation founded by Barry Hankerson in the early 1970s. Aaliyah had performed at Operation Get Down events from the age of 5, and her parents had always been closely involved. The fund would provide financial assistance to 4 students a year at Aaliyah's old alma mater, the Detroit High School for the Fine and Performing Arts. The week after her death, Aaliyah's final album went to #1 on the charts, while her previous 2 also re-entered the hit parade. Aaliyah's last recorded track was the Timbaland song I Am Music, on which she was due to have worked with Beck. She was also hoping to collaborate with Trent Reznor of 9 Inch Nails, in a move that would have come totally from left field. Truly, no one can say what Aaliyah might have done had she lived. As so many said on her passing, she was an angel, 1 in a million. Rest in peace, baby girl.
Thanks for buying Maximum Aaliyah. We hope you enjoyed it. Watch out for further titles on Chrome Dreams coming up soon. If you did enjoy it or have any comments or suggestions, write to us at Chrome Dreams, PO Box 230, New Malden, Surrey, UK, KT36YY, or email on mail@chromedreams.co.uk. Details of our full catalogue are listed on our website at www.chromedreams.co.uk. Thanks again for listening, and goodbye for now.